Out today, which is amazing. Thank you all for joining us today. We have such a jam-packed schedule. I'm going to carry on, start this show, and we'll have our colleagues join us when they can. So as we settle into today and open our hearts and our minds, we'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we are hosting this event on a virtual platform, let's take a moment to acknowledge the stewards and importance of the lands which we each call home. We acknowledge that Toronto, where the Insurance Institute of Canada is located, is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. And we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. We acknowledge the land that many of us are meeting on in this region is the traditional territory of the many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in our relationships and to foster our own understanding of Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Please take a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and can, each in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Welcome, everyone. My name is Beverly Lewis-Hunte, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Senior Program Officer with Career Connections here at the Insurance Institute of Canada. I'm pleased to host this phenomenal panel today of Black women working within our industry. I first off want to acknowledge and thank our General Insurance Human Resources Group and their Diversity and Inclusion Working Group for being such active and supportive partners with this series for Voices of Inclusion events. Our purpose really is to showcase the diversity within our industry by spotlighting various equity-seeking groups and allyship. We know that DEI is not about exclusion, but very much about inclusion. So these conversations continue to be very enlightening, eye-opening, and we continue to drive the conversations within our companies forward. Thank you to the team for helping source the great panelists like the ones we have today. So I did want to just mention that technically today is the end of Black History Month, and I say technically in quotes because those of us know that Black history cannot be contained within 1 month. And next week is also International Women's Day, which is celebrated on March the 8th. So what better way to highlight today but Black women in insurance? We have a lot of women doing great things amongst us. We know that our industry is about 66% female. So we're very proud and boast that. So we know that gender is not necessarily an issue. However, equality and advancement, mentorship, pay equity, and a host of other areas still need to be addressed within our companies as a way to truly meet advancement for all women. So the format for today is going to be a little bit different than we normally do for our Voices events. We've asked our panel to bring to light an area that's important to them, which we all know we could have talked for hours on. However, we're going to devote our full 90 minutes to pack it all in. And we won't have breakout rooms. I'm going to start off today's session, lead the conversation for the first half. We'll take a brief stretch halfway through, and my wonderful colleague and co-host Shadé will continue for the second half. So let's get started. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, give a brief overview of themselves, and we're going to kick things off by starting with Bahja. Over to you.
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you. My name is Bahja Yusuf. I am from Desjardins. I'm a senior claim advisor in the accident and benefit. I have joined insurance almost 23 years ago. The entire time almost in claims, done different roles in claims, but right now I landed in my final destination for today is accident benefit. I was born in East Africa, Somalia. Spent a fair amount of my childhood in Saudi Arabia. Moved to Canada at age of 12. Immigrated to Canada at age of 12, and I have 2 adult children, and that's about it for now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Great introduction. Thank you for that, Beverly. My name is Dionne Bowers. I am, just to summarize myself, I am a business owner, educator, author. I'm a co-founder of the Canadian Association of Black Insurance Professionals. If you're not a member, shameless plug here. If you're not a member, become a member. To Beverly's point, next week is International Women's Day, and we have a fabulous lineup, including Julie Black. So you don't want to miss that. I'm also chair of the association, and it's great to be amongst this group. I run my own business that helps the industry grow, develop. I am, just like Bahja, an immigrant. I came to Canada a long time ago. Let me just put it that way. From Jamaica. So I've been in the industry, it'll be 25 years this year in various disciplines, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Erika Schurr. I am Chief Actuary of Travelers Canada with over 20 years of experience in the industry. Graduate of the University of Waterloo, fellow of the Casualty Actuarial Society, and fellow of the Canadian Institute of Actuaries. Really passionate about the topic, so thank you for having me. I'm born and raised Canadian in Toronto, but my background is that my mother is originally from the Caribbean, from Barbados, and my father is German, so they met here, and yeah, that's basically my background.
And Jen.
Hi, my name is Jen, and actually I work in investments with Manulife. I have been in the industry roughly about 15 years. I'm a chartered financial analyst. I went to the University of Toronto, and then I did my MBA as well. My background is I'm originally from Ghana. I came to Canada to university and I've stayed ever since. And I'm really passionate about everything that has to do with empowering Black women, especially when it comes to women in finance. That's, where my passion lies because there's usually a minority when it comes to Black women represented there. So I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maylene Thompson. I am a manager at Definity. I'm a manager for commercial and complex auto claims. I've been in, a professional for over 20 years, legal for 18 years, and the remainder in insurance since 2018. I've moved up when I started my insurance industry from being an auto adjuster, handling property claims, BI, and then into management. I was born and raised on the small Caribbean island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, just a little tiny blip in the Caribbean. And I came here when I was 10. And, as a lot of us immigrants, we strive to work a lot harder and we move, as best we can through these industries and through these professional developments. And I'm happy to be here representing, Definity in this forum.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Mugisa. I work at Westland Insurance. Shout out to my Westland family here on the call. I have over 16 years of experience in the industry. I am a branch manager here at Westland. I'm also a part of the DEI Council. I'm also a part of the DEI Council here at Westland, where we actively work on implementing policies and practices to amplify belonging within the organization. I too am also an immigrant. I'm from Jamaica. I migrated here 10 years ago. And talking about Black women and the struggles that they face within a major, being a minority within this space is something that I too am also passionate about, and I'm just happy to be here to share my experiences.
Thank you. I wanted to also introduce a very special woman, my co-host, who will be also leading half of the session today. Shadé, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Shadé Ladipo, and representing Wawanesa, but also co-hosting the session with the amazing Beverly, aka Bev. I moved to Canada 4 years ago, prime years, and I've been in the insurance industry for 6 months, but I've been in the DEI industry for over 12 years. So I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Manager at Wawanesa Insurance, and I'm just very honored to be in the presence of such amazing women and people who are inspiring so many of us. So super excited.
Awesome. So thank you, everyone. Bahja, I wanted to start the conversation today with you because you share an experience with a number of folks who have mentioned, they came to Canada. You in particular came with, little insurance experience, navigated having a family, and has really progressed in the industry. Why don't you kick things off and share your story with us?
Thank you, Beverly. Yes, as a few of you here, I've immigrated at the age of 12 to Canada. And coming from an immigrant family, there is that additional layer of there's zero insurance knowledge. I feel like Canadians somewhat, have a little bit more knowledge in insurance than an immigrant family. With that said, I've started my career in insurance almost 23 years ago. I started thinking, okay, my English was great, but little did I know the English that is required in the insurance industry is a little bit more advanced. I started in claims, and so you can understand the amount of proficiency that's required in the insurance industry when you are dealing with claims, understanding contracts and policies. It's a whole different language. That was very, very challenging in my beginning of my career. Beside being a Black female, which wasn't my biggest issues at the beginning, I was dealing with more trying to fit in just from an immigrant perspective. It's just, there's a language barrier. When I started in the insurance industry, it was mainly Canadians, mainly white. The insurance industry looked a lot different 23 years ago than it is today. I think the corporate culture have changed. It was more, I would say, white male industry. It's not the same today, of course, but that was the environment that I started. So there was a lot of challenging dealing with, just communication and just trying to fit in with the norm social skills, and just being able to kind of advance yourself was extremely challenging because I'm just like focusing more on trying to fit in. So that was a huge challenge. And then, at some point you learn to, you get better at your job, you gain a comfort, and then the other aspect after that, okay, well, I'm gonna try to advance my career. You start in the industry and you're made to believe that if you work hard, you can advance in that organization. And then shortly after that, you find out that's unfortunately is not the case for everyone. That information might be out there, but it's a little bit more challenging when you are a woman of color, you are an immigrant, so at some point you kind of learn to navigate through as much as you can. Also, additionally, comes with the immigrant mindset. You were told not to complain, be grateful to what you have. This is how I was raised, and you don't want to stir the pot. And it was, you don't want to come across that you are disagreeing or have, to use the word racism, it's just kind of a taboo, I think, in my time when I started in the insurance industry. I think the conversations have changed a lot, at least in my organization in Desjardins anyway. I could definitely comfortably say that that's not the case today. People are the company does encourage for people to speak. We do have a platform, Courageous Talk, an employee-driven platform that is very encouraged by, and a lot of our senior leaders attend. So the conversation is taking place. We are being heard. So I'm happy to say that is, we're moving to a right direction. And also, as Beverly did mention, that it is women driven force today in the insurance industry, and that's for sure for Desjardins. It is, I would say, the majority are female, which is great. And additionally too, starting to see now women of color, BIPOC females in the leadership. So it's a positive direction that we're moving. And I think the reason is because platforms like this and having these conversations, whether we have this conversation outside of our industry or within our industry, it's making a huge difference. So you at some point I would stop basically trying to fit in and just be myself, just because I think the environment that we're in today is promoting that, which is great. I had the mindset for forever to be Black or to be immigrant, you have to be exceptional, and that's great, but I want to be exceptional for the right reasons. And I hope these conversation that's taking places today continues, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I do definitely see an improvement in my organization, and I hope we continue this. And I'm very honored to be part of this platform and given the chance to speak on behalf of being an immigrant and behalf of my company and all that. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to bring Jen and Maylene into conversation. Just because, career and family and working within the industry, are important to us. Jen, if I wanted to get your thoughts on this, and then I'll ask Maylene for a couple of thoughts as well. Jen?
Yeah, just like Bahja, I come from an immigrant family as well. My story is a little different because I didn't immigrate here. I actually did come here for school, and then I ended up staying here. So it's a little different. I can't call my family all immigrants because my family is still, my parents still living in Ghana. So my experience is a little different. But, when I do have two little girls, and when I think about career and being somebody of color and being somebody who really wants to make sure that my kids have a different experience than what I have experienced, I think about how we could be more effective in making policies that work for immigrants. So the immigrant experience is always very different because, there's not the second and third generation when it comes to families. So workplace policies need to be sort of a bit more flexible because they don't have that grandma who's going to go pick up a little child when the child is not well, or they don't have that support system when they come here. And I can speak of my own experience, even though I do have a little bit of family in here, it's quite challenging when you have little children. So being an immigrant also influences your work. It does influence what level that you can, and you're almost as though you can advance in your career because you're an immigrant. And I know that, I think I'm one of the, I feel privileged that I can still work and be in an organization where I can work and still have my little kids. But I've heard stories of people who can't do that and who are not able to work, and one person in the family has to stay home. And that's a disadvantage because they're already from a socioeconomic background, they're already not at the same level as their counterparts who actually are born and raised in Canada. So they're starting from a level that's slightly different from other people as well. So, I think I've said this to you, Bev, many times, that I feel like the conversations are great, but they actually need to influence policies at work. They need to make sure that we're shaping the workplace to be a bit more inclusive, not just inclusive in hiring people of BIPOC or people like myself in leadership and getting us into the C-suite, but also understanding the social economic background of different people and making sure that workplace policies, something as simple as return to the office, it's not as simple for every immigrant family. And so we need to be a bit more inclusive, and we need to be aware of some of these cultural background. Canada has opened up its doors for immigration, and that should be reflected in our policies. And I think that's the additional, I just want my kids to grow up having two little girls, they're 8 and 5. I just don't want them to walk the same path that I've had to walk. I want them to walk a different path. And I hope that I could do that for them. And that's why I'm part of this conversation.
That's great. Thanks, Jen. Maylene, I know we had a conversation, and for those of you who know the GTA, Maylene, you grew up in some parts of Toronto. Again, your experience in terms of, your career and moving up and family, what would you add?
Yeah, absolutely, Beverly. One of the conversations I had with you was that I think I've lived in pretty much what you would classify as every ghetto in Toronto, because that's what it's considered. Like I came to Canada when I was 10 and I landed in Jungle, which is Lawrence West. And then, I moved to Tandridge, then to Chalk Farm, then to Ardwick and Jane and Finch. And I know you guys know all of these names because that's kind of what's plastered on, the media as kind of bad neighborhoods. But again, there are hardworking families within these neighborhoods. Just because of one or two quote unquote bad apples, the whole neighborhood or the whole perception of the people in those neighborhoods it's tarnished. And so kind of having, when you start interviewing or start putting your resume out there and your address on your resume says, 24 San Romano Way, it's like, do I really want to hire somebody that is in that neighborhood, when in fact that person is working their butt off to succeed? For example, being told, even when you are, you have the experience, we need more from you. Whereas your counterpart who doesn't have the experience, doesn't have the same qualifications, is kind of getting ahead when, it's being told. And that, from my own personal experience, well, in order for you to get to this point, you need your CIP. Well, I'm looking around the room and I'm like, well, all these other people were hired without it. So why is it that I need my CIP when all my other colleagues don't necessarily need my CIP? When I was a law clerk, you need to make sure you have this course or that course, or, all of these barriers that are being put in place. Again, biases that are being put in place just from where you live, where you grow up, and then the things that you would need in order to succeed. Jen touched on the fact I'm a single mom. I have 2 girls. Sometimes it's difficult to kind of navigate work when we're trying to balance raising a family with the demands of being a parent. Being a parent is what kind of is running our society. That should be our forefront. And making sure that we're raising productive children and balancing that with being successful Black women at the same time. And somehow, if we choose to advance our career, that makes us less of, and so we're in this constant battle with trying to be pillars within our careers and within our families.
That's a great summary, Maylene, just very well said. And I think it leads to our next discussion. As Black women raising families, there's an extra pressure, to be an example, for our families, accepting our Blackness, yet existing in a world that, not everyone looks like us. And I want to turn things over to Erika now. Erika, how has fitting in impacted your career journey, and what impact, does this concept have on minorities?
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't have, just for everyone on the call, we did not plan our answers ahead of time, and I'm amazed at how well the conversation is flowing. Definitely want to echo everything that Bahja and Maylene and Jen have said. I'm always interested in how people turn up in the insurance industry, because no one plans on becoming an insurance professional when they're a little kid, right? You kind of fall into it, and I think as an actuary, you more fall into the profession, and then you end up in insurance versus some of the other professions. But when I went to school, when I went to Waterloo to become an actuary, right? The top school for mathematics. You know, looking around the room and you know, do I really belong here? Being, you know, not only female minority, but a woman of color, and having to, you know, talk myself into having that confidence that I deserve to be there. I can compete with the best and make it through. And you know, to that point, you know, when you first, you know, start out your career journey and you look around and how do you fit in, and how do you show that you can be at the table, and how you make decisions on how to maybe change your appearance or change your hobbies. You know, at some point in my career, I thought you can't get ahead without learning how to golf, right? And so bought a set of golf clubs, took some lessons because, you know, that is the culture of the industry, and how do you fit in? Um, I see it still today, as much as we talk about it. You know, there has been more acceptance of, you know, black hair. You know, that has been a discussion when of course my mom was trying to advance her career. She had to have straight hair. It had to be you know, this perfect hairdo every time in order to not show the curls that we've learned to embrace. And so really happy to see the curls on the call. Mine are pulled back today, but definitely learning to embrace that. And you know, I see it even with my staff. Some of my staff have chosen to anglicize their names still today to try and fit in. And I think that that's really why these conversations are so important. As much we talk about you know, growing as a society, diversification, you know, Travelers has all of these diversity networks. I'm chairing a, you know, Women in Analytics and Allies professional group within Travelers. Um, we said it already. We're biased creatures. Like, as human beings, we're biased. As much as we talk about being unbiased, saying it and living it are two different things. And there's actually an amazing example from a group called the International Association of Black Actuaries, IABA. And they have this cartoon, you know, go to their homepage and you'll find it, and it basically describes the journey of a white actuary and a black actuary, and how this idea of fitting in can impact you as a minority in your career. And so, you know, I would just encourage everyone on the call, you know, when you get 300 resumes on your desk, right? You do that screening, and you look, and you know, this person has all these credentials and this person has exactly these same credentials. And you know, you know, we talked about, you know, people starting to now, you know, no longer consciously filter for things like where is the mailing address and what is the style of the name. But if you have two equal candidates and you then go to interview them, you know, that's where the real fit conversation comes in, because people look in an interview to form a connection with someone. And if someone has a completely different background than you, and let's say, yeah, they're a single mother trying to, you know, raise their kids, you know, they won't have time for the same extracurriculars necessarily, or they won't have time to engage in the same way. It doesn't make them any less of a worker, but you can see how you get filtered out of that whole experience. Or maybe for the next promotion, where you're looking at two equivalent candidates in your company, and this idea of fit, you know, this person's a better fit. I do think we need to consciously, you know, remind ourselves that these personal connections you're making, and I know we're going to get into representation, but that's why I feel so passionate about it, is because, you know, I think I can connect with people and really bring them along. And it's something I'm trying to do as a chief actuary, as a woman in analytics and STEM. Only 2% of actuaries in the Casualty Actuarial Society identify as Black, and that is way less than the population. And so how do we encourage people to think about it as a career and be welcome in that career? So thank you for letting me speak about something I'm very passionate about.
This is what it's all about, Erika. These are passionate, important discussions, and I want to bring that conversation to Sabrina, who I identify as being in the mountains of BC on the verge of Montana and the border of Saskatchewan out there.
Calgary.
Yeah? Calgary, there we go. So what's it like, in terms of fitting in a representation from your end? If you could just give us a quick point or two.
Thanks. First, I want to say thanks, Erika. Like, I totally concur with everything that you said previously. My experience that I have with fitting in is that I find being an immigrant and a Black woman is that I constantly have to censor myself just so that I'm not misunderstood, or I have to prep the conversation first just to explain what it is that I'm going to be what I'm saying, so that it's not taken as something untoward, or it's not seen as me being reinforcing those stereotypes that are levied towards Black women. That cultural difference that exists most of the times when I'm having conversations with my colleagues, I have to pause and I have to think. Like I always say, I translate it in my brain to see how it's gonna land, because again, that lack of representation of having someone who understands me from my perspective, from my space, from that cultural background, it's not there. So if it was there, then that understanding would be that I mean no ill intent, and it's just a cultural difference here. And so for most of my conversations that I have with anyone, it is, let me think about it first, because that's my technique in how I try to fit in. So that's the experience that I've had. I think that what organizations can do, and Erika touched on it, is try to foster a more inclusive organization, in terms an inclusive environment for Black women, just celebrating the culture of everybody who works for them. I know we're in a predominantly white space, and that might be difficult, but if we hold spaces where Black women can have those conversations, talk about our cultural differences, celebrate the cultural differences that exist, because just in general, as women overall, we're all different. Our backgrounds, like 8 of us are on this panel, and most of us are immigrants, but our background are so different. And so when we show up in these spaces, it's like it's threefold: that challenge of being an immigrant, being a visible minority, and then trying to navigate through the work dynamic, trying to navigate that workspace to see where I can find my footing, and dealing with so many issues of unconscious biases that show up. It is mentally exhausting sometimes. And I think once we're able to, and these conversations will help us and help organizations to have to realize that, it's, even though we cater to a majority culture, we too do make up a part of this environment and this space. And all we're asking is just to be included in the conversations.
Sabrina, you mentioned, the point of mentally exhausting. And I wanted to talk to Dionne, because Dionne, we had a conversation recently just about burnout and health. And all of these conversations, it has a real impact on us showing up at work and our mental health. And so I wanted to Dionne, turn things over to you, and then I'll hear from Jen after. Dionne, what are your thoughts on this?
So I love this conversation and where it's going, because we talk about microaggressions. It's a word that's overused. And I think also it has been overused in the last 4 years, specifically. And so I look at them as subtle prejudices. And when you have that in an environment, especially a workplace environment, and they're you have different levels of it, because you have micro insults, you have three types really. But when you have those in a workplace environment and they're towards marginalized groups, they can be on a micro level, but they can also be on a macro level, right? And depending on the toxicity of that environment, it may fall into that macro level. So I think when it comes to the repetitive behavior, regardless if it's micro or macro, we have to recognize that as Black women, it can lead to negative impacts on our lives, whether it's our work life, our personal life, or both. And so things like increased depression and anxiety, prolonged stress and trauma, heart disease. You've got things like headaches. They can turn into migraines, high blood pressure, sleep deprivation, which ultimately affects our moods, right? So when you have that person in your toxic environment saying you're an angry Black woman, maybe it's because of my work environment, because I'm sleep deprived, but don't mistake that for frustration, right? This is where I think a lot of organizations need to do a better job at understanding those emotions that a lot of Black women are labeled as. There's a direct link with the subtle prejudices when to type 2 diabetes, right? So all of these health concerns that are attributed to those toxic environments, again, organizations not thinking, okay, well, I provide benefits, which includes life and health benefits, right? So what is that doing to the offering that these organizations are giving to their employees, right? There's a massive strain on our healthcare system as it is right now, but compound that with Black women and women of color who go through this on a regular basis. To Maylene's point, if you're a single mom of 2 and you're living in these urban centers that have been labeled in the media as don't go there type thing, what do you think that is doing to the single mother of 2 children? There's a lot of pressure, and the pressure to perform at work within a culture that is not designed for you. So when I think about what women have gone through, what I've gone through, we all have different stories, and we have different degrees of what those prejudices look like. So the burnout piece, and this was my experience, was that I just had enough. When people are, and I had this up until earlier this week, where someone had said to me, after it was at the movie night we did, Bob Marley, and I'm explaining the reason why my parents, our entire family, left Jamaica, because it was over the 2 years of the political unrest and all that stuff. So I'm explaining it, and the young lady said to me, I didn't realize you were Jamaican. And I said, oh, is because, I don't speak with an accent. Like, I don't know this woman, right? So I'm not going to come out with my Jamaican patois right off the bat. But people who know me, that's what's going to happen. But it's understanding that, I didn't know you were Jamaican. And then she went on to say, you're so light. I had to bite my tongue on that one, because it was one of those things where I'm just kind of like, do I engage or don't I? Now I'm very tired, so I chose not to engage and just channeled the conversation somewhere else, right? It would have been a very good teacher. It was a teachable moment, but I couldn't, right? So understanding that you get that all the time, that repetitive behavior will wear on you and it will just send you into another dimension. And so when that happens, again, the angry Black woman comes out according to your leaders and your leadership team. And I think that, again, leaders need to do a better job at understanding the why behind what is happening. So the burnout, my story is that it was a lot. You were head cook and bottle washer as a leader within an organization to the point where you get sick. And I'm not compromising my health for anybody or any organization. And I think we have to do a better job to advocate for ourselves that is a threshold that I'm not prepared to cross. So when that happened, I recognized, you know what, I'm done with corporate. And within 6 months, 5 months, I said bye to corporate and focused on myself, my business, which I'd started and I was doing part-time, and then I just went into full-time. But I also said to myself when that was done, I said, was that the best idea? But I don't want to second guess myself, and I had to just persevere that way. I also took 2 months off because I could. I had never taken time, that self-care that we talk about, taken time off from working. There was 30 years of working nonstop, right? Working 2 jobs if I had to. And so recognizing that the burnout is real. I know some organizations will go through that and ask their staff to fill out surveys about burnout and calculate that burnout score. Okay, great. What are you doing with that information? What are you doing to help those who have indicated that your burnout rate is 85%? Is that not a concern for you? Right? And then asking an individual to do 4 different jobs because you can't find a candidate to help and not pay them for that as well. So when I've gone through that, I've said to myself, no. And so I'm working, I'm mentoring and coaching, especially young people, to advocate for themselves. And the question you asked me, Bev, is why we advocate for ourselves. We do it because no one else will do it. Okay. I know, Graham, you're online to talk about allyship. I'm not a fan of that word, but you need strong, I call them co-conspirators, who will be in your corner and advocate for you.
Thanks for that, Dionne. Very powerful, and it's amazing to me that, again, people wouldn't believe the microaggressions and the stories that each of us have. We could all write a little book, and people would be amazed that this is not, 1960 microaggressions. This is 2024. But we live with it, we deal with it, and we move on. This is a really important discussion. And like I said, the Voices usually has a break and we go into breakout rooms. We're going to just take a brief stretch. I want everyone to just grab a drink, be fresh for the second half of our conversation. We're going to pass it over to Shadé. So if you could just want to take like 2 minutes break, get a drink, come back. We're going to resume just in a few minutes, okay? Thanks, everyone.
Right. Good. Bev, are you ready?
I am ready. This is great. I think everyone's on their way back. And so I will pass things over to you, Shadé.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. Amazing conversation going on. I've just been, it's like you all are speaking for me. Like I literally can, and just allow any of the women who have been speaking to speak for me because it feels like our stories are so similar. I wanted to keep the conversation moving and invite Jen to really talk about where Dionne left off in terms of we have to advocate for ourselves, right? And Jen, I know that you're doing some amazing work with EWIIN, and I just wanted to know how important is this work you do in terms of how you're helping women who are Black to show up? How important is that?
So EWIIN, and for people who don't know, it's Ebony Women in Insurance, and it's a group of women, obviously people who look like us, who advocate for women. And I personally, my personal story is actually started with meeting someone from EWIIN. The founder of EWIIN was one of the first people that I met when I started my career, and she was very impactful in directing and helping shape where I am today. She introduced me to the first person I considered to be a mentor, and at the time it was a very significant point in my career where I doubted myself in everything I did, and not because I wasn't capable, but because everybody around me, I was the only Black person in the chosen field that I wanted to be in. And so I was often questioned. I was often being asked if I was capable enough to do a certain role. And I had met, I'd met her through her work through EWIIN, and she sort of helped shape the trajectory of my career. So the work that we do is to make sure that we empower Black women in insurance or in insurance-related fields, or Black women in financial institutions, to ensure that they have the tools necessary. We have mentorship programs that we are able to offer to some of the people, and we have experienced people who have been in their career for a lot of years, who have experienced some of these. I don't like using the word microaggressions because I don't see anything micro about some of the experiences that people have. But having said that, I have my own experiences that sort of makes me a big advocate when it comes to Black women, especially Black women in finance. Obviously, I'm passionate about everything finance, and so my bias is sort of coming through when I speak of Black women in not just in the insurance industry, but Black women in investment as well, because we are typically in the minority as well. And I like to echo some of the points that Dionne also mentioned. I once had a new manager who came in, and we were doing some work, and I was trying to figure it out in Excel. And, her comment to me was, do you know how to use VLOOKUP? And I was a bit stunned, but it really affected me, and it impacted me negatively, because the whole day I couldn't help but think why she'd asked me that question. I considered myself an Excel guru. I mean, I started off my career as an actuarial analyst, so Excel was something that I needed to have known really well inside out. And so I wondered why she would ask that question, but I felt that she wouldn't have asked the question to somebody else. But just because I was Black, and I'm pretty sure she didn't understand the magnitude of that. But I left work that day feeling very undeserving to be in the position that I was. And it really negatively impacted my mental health, because I had to question myself. I had to wonder if I was supposed to be where I was, or if I should pick a career that was had more people represented who looked like me. And so I had to navigate through that. And one of the biggest successes for me was I had someone from EWIIN. I had someone that I could actually just quickly send a message and ask a question, and the person sort of guided me through how to navigate through the process, and also provide me with the resources that was necessary for me, and also be a person. I mean, from a human perspective, you need somebody who would be there to sort of encourage you, to say, you know, you are deserving of where you're coming from, and you're deserving of the work that you're doing, and encouraging you. And that's some of the work that EWIIN does. We've had speakers who, you know, speak to us about, I had another personal experience at the beginning of the year, and the speaker who came on actually made it a point to make time to talk to me outside of, you know, her speaking at EWIIN. So we arranged a call, which was really helpful. I spoke to her for about an hour, and it helped me navigate. And this happened at the beginning of this year. So sort of coming on to those speaking meetings and really tapping into the talent that we bring on board also helps. I mean, mental health is something that I think we don't talk about often enough. And I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but often in the community where I come from, there's a little bit of negativity when it comes to mental health. And so I don't know if that cascades down to people in the C-suite, but I mean, for people represented here in the C-suite, I like to encourage them to understand that culturally, mental health is something that people of color don't talk about. And it's something that we are, you know, I can speak about my background really well, because that's what I know. We are sort of brought up to learn how to navigate through every situation without necessarily having the tools to navigate those situations. And so you could have somebody who is really burned out at work, who would not be able to voice it out as eloquently as somebody else who maybe is of Canadian heritage. And so those things actually weigh on us. And again, I speak about my background. I was brought up, failure was not an option for me. I didn't have any room to fail growing up. And I'm pretty sure that my parents meant well, and failure should never be an option. And so we bring some of these biases into work. And so when we have issues, we're the last people who would go to HR to sort of help navigate through maybe a situation that you're having at work. So I just want to encourage people in the C-suite, people with leadership positions, to ensure that they are actually paying attention to some of these people who they work for, because there is an increase mental health breakdown among people of color. And I say that from a medical perspective because I work on the life side. So we also see the data. And for people who are in position of power, some of these things also needs to, you know, you need to realize how much this actually influences your bottom line, right? If you have all the people claiming short-term disability, right, you're going to get a lot more claims. I mean, I speak to people on the life side, especially, you're going to get a lot more claims that's going to impact your profitability. So it's not a conversation that we just have like a Black History Month and then talk about people of color and then push it aside and decide that we're not going to talk about it anymore. We really need to be cognizant about it. We need to ensure that the people of color, and not just people of color, but migrants have come into Canada with different cultural biases that they have themselves, and they're not able to advocate for themselves. And as Dionne said, you need to be your own advocate. But if your livelihood depends on your job, it's very difficult for you to be your own advocate. Dionne has worked really hard to the point of privilege where she's able to take 2 months off. But that's not the story for a lot of people. For a lot of people, taking 2 months off is a luxury they can't afford. Or they are afraid of losing their job, or they're afraid of the stigma that it would come to, even if that was offered to them. Or they're afraid that they would come back with a perception that they are not adequate, you know. So they come in, and I think Bahja touched on this in her earlier submission when she did really speak about trying to fit in. And I think Erika also touched on it, trying to fit in, being in a space where you're the only person, you know. For years, from university to my second or third career, I was always the only Black person in the space that I was in. You know, I was on a team with not even just the only Black person, but the only woman on my team. I started off my career in investment, and for years I only had male colleagues that I needed to really contend with. And whilst most of them were really supportive of my journey, there were a couple of them that made me feel uncomfortable, I mean,
sorry,
just
Jen,
little.
I have to just stop you there real quick. We don't have time and we have so much to cover. I
Yes,
really
yes.
apologize. There's so much to
That's
cover.
fine. Yeah.
I mean, if we talk about we're going to be here for a long time. But
Exactly,
what you
yeah.
said was so important.
Yeah.
And so I want to move it real quickly to the issue that you just presented, which is about mentorship, sponsorship within these organizations. Like you mentioned the effect of having someone who understood you. And we look at Dionne. Dionne left the industry. So it's a lot of young Black people have missed out on having Dionne in that position of power in the insurance industry, right? How important is this? And I want to take this and move this to Maylene real quickly. How important is it for Black people and people of color to get mentored or have sponsors in industries, especially in our industry?
Absolutely. One of the things that we see that's very lacking is mentorship. Mentorship is important because it fosters an environment of growth, development, all of the positive things that we want to see. It promotes diversity and it helps to build a network that allows us to learn new things. But we're not seeing those opportunities at all, those networking programs being implemented. And, Shadé, I asked you this, I said, what are we doing as an organization, or who do we need to have the conversation with so that we can start having mentorship programs implemented within our organization so that we are seen and that we have the opportunity to grow and develop and move forward, because it appears that we're not getting those opportunities. We're not getting those opportunities to be mentored. No one's looking to put their hand up and sponsor us to say, hey, here's what I'm really strong at doing. And I see that there's, maybe I can help you. And, I'm going to go back on my personal experiences, and something very similar to last year. I had a direct leader, and unfortunately, she's no longer with the organization, but being able to sit with her and she engaged me based on, creating a safe space for us to be vulnerable. And we talked about fear. I was fearful as a Black woman. I'm fearful to say that I need mentorship. I'm fearful to say that I don't know enough. Jen talked about the fact that we are taught that we have to be strong. We have no option to fail. So kind of having to put that aside and put my hand up and say, I need to be vulnerable instead. And I don't know how to get to the next step. I need help with X equals C2. I have no idea where X came from. So can somebody explain that to me? I don't necessarily want to put my hand up to say that, because now I'm looking like I may not know, why did she get into this position, without knowing where X came from. And so we're seeing there's a vast lack of mentorship for women of color. I'm going to speak for myself, that's not available. And maybe, again, that's part of it's my fear to put my hand up to say, I need help. And again, I want to celebrate the fact that my direct leader did point it out and did put herself in that spot to be a sponsor, and was not afraid to advocate for me within that space. And that allowed us to leverage each other's strengths, because it wasn't about her, creating that space so that I can take over. It was for her to build me up, but also for her to learn. And so that created a really safe space. And I'm seeing that we don't have that safe space, and those opportunities are not being created. I didn't want, I had a whole speech on mentorship, but I really wanted to point out, one of the things we talked about, Shadé, is really a challenge. As I'm a leader here, but what are we doing as organizations not only for my organization, and I'm going to point it out for my organization, what are we doing to ensure that we are creating those safe spaces? Our inclusion team, our C-suite VPs who are on this call, what are we doing to create mentorship programs for? We have peer mentorship, that's great. What are we doing for our leaders? What are we doing to support their growth without you being fearful that we're going to take over your role? What are we doing for Black women, that there's lack of representation beyond the manager level? What are we doing is my question. And again, that's a call of action that I would like to see and I would like an answer to, not just for my organization, but for all of us that are sitting on this call representing different organizations.
Great call out. Yeah.
Thanks, Jack. No, I think I'll leave it at that because I really want us to start asking that question, and really for us to really start being our advocate, but also for us to put aside our own fear and saying we need to be mentored, and here's kind of where I need to start and who's willing to step forward.
And what you said is very important, right? I want to move the focus now to Bahja. Now, Maylene, you said something very powerful, and you said, you know, what is the fear, right? But I want to ask, whose responsibility? Because I want to move this conversation from sponsorship towards the lack of representation that we do not have in the C-suite. Whose responsibility is it for seeking mentorship or sponsorship? Does it fall on the person who needs it? Because while we say organizations should, do they need it or do we need it? So who should be? Where's the should? You know what I mean? So I want to have that conversation because, again, I'm also a woman in a professional position, and I know that fear.
I think it's incumbent, sorry, Bahja, I think it's incumbent on both of us to step forward. You know, us to put ourselves out there, but then who's receiving us?
Okay. Bahja, what
I concur with Maylene.
yes.
I do. I think it's the responsibility falls on both sides. I mean, but again, it all depends where you are in your career. I think it's easy to, you know, seek that mentorship that you need in my level of position today where I am, you know, having that much experience today. And, you know, with age comes, I think, comfort, being comfortable in your own, under your own skin as a female. I think we do become our own as a certain decade adds into our age, right? So versus somebody who's just starting in their career today in their 20s, they might not have that level of comfort. But I can definitely tell you that there is a huge difference in mentorship from when I started in the insurance industry versus today. When I started, the only available to me was being mentored by white colleagues or white managers. And today, you know, luckily with having more people of color, BIPOC women in the leadership, I have that opportunity today to be mentored. So the representation is there. Would I say it's fully there in the same level? Of course not, but it's definitely, we're moving toward right direction, but we definitely need, I think it falls onto the responsibility on both ends. But again, it all depends on where you are in your career, what comfort level you have, right? So I'm more comfortable today seeking that. And you do get more out of being mentored by somebody who represents you. It's not the same. Not that I had an amazing mentorship and from white managers and white colleagues, but there's still that comfort level that there's just a certain things that you just would not be comfortable sharing with, you know, such as, you know, I wouldn't be comfortable saying I applied for promotion a few times that I didn't get. And Maylene mentioned that where I was told you need to get a CIP, and I've had the same experience. And you know, your colleague gets promoted who doesn't have the CIP. You need a university degree. You need you need X amount of years of experience. And but that, I think, you know, I can speak for my organization. We are moving from that direction. You know, is there more work that needs to be done? Yes, but I definitely see that. I mean, 23 years of data, I can see we are shifting in a much positive, paving the way for, I think, the next generation. But representation, I think, is what we need, and we need to see more people represent us in the leadership to get that mentoring.
Okay, and you see, this is brilliant because it ties into the next focus, which is the lack of representation in the C-suite. Now, as Beverly mentioned at the beginning, the insurance industry, over 60% are women, but there is a visible lack of representation when it comes to other kinds of diversity, especially for people of color and Black people. I want to bring in Sabrina and bring in Graham, and Graham hasn't really fully been introduced yet. As we talk about what does this mean for you, Sabrina, as a woman who is in leadership position, when you do not see representation that you can relate to? And Graham, is it visible from that side? Because maybe it's just visible to us because we don't see the representation. Is it visible? Is it, you know, what does it look like from that side when you put up your, what's the word? You put up the list of your board members, you put up lists of executives, year in, 5 years, 10 years, and it's all people who look alike. How does that look like from that point, that C-suite point where you are? Again, we don't know because we're not there. So I don't know if that makes sense. Sabrina, you go ahead, and then Graham, you can take over.
Thanks, Shadé. For me, with the lack of representation in the C-suite and just leadership role of Black women overall, it does create feelings of isolation, and there's this added pressure on you when you're the only. I've had so many instances where I've just been the only in the room, and now I'm like, okay, I would joke about it sometimes just to ease that pressure on myself to be like, okay, now everybody will know my name. But it does create that, who do I relate to? Who will understand me when I speak? Who is going to connect with me on that level as a Black woman, knowing the experiences that I'm having just to navigate this space? And it's not just a physical level, it's mentally, like, how do I get through this space? How do I articulate my position with everybody within this room? And again, it doesn't feed into the Black tropes and the stereotypes of, oh, this angry Black woman, or the negative stereotypes that come about. And what that does for me sometimes when I'm in those spaces, I choose not to participate. And most of the times I do have things to contribute, but I'm like, you know what? I don't know if whatever I'll say will make a difference. And at this point in time, I just want to get through the day, get through the space, and then go home and get within my own comfort, in my own comfort zone where I'm not dealing with all of this pressure. Because from my cultural background is one where I've never been seen as a minority where I'm from. And so as an immigrant, this is a new landscape that I'm navigating. And then when I look around and I see like all the leaders and all the representatives, nobody looks like me. Like it's a little bit daunting to just get through that space and be like, who do I connect with? Who can I have conversations with? Can I go have a coffee with this person? And can we have a conversation where they will understand me for me? And not if I make a joke or I make a remark, it's like taken out of context when there is no meaning behind it. So representation for me, and it what it does too, it hinders advancement. Like, you don't see people like me in C-suites. You don't see people like me often in leadership role, especially women. Like you say, 60% of women in leadership role are in insurance, but Black women are marginalized within those roles. And so when I think about advancement, I'm like, how am I going to fit in if I get to the next level? What do I have to contribute? And then it also creates that mental pressure again, where I'm like, no, I have to represent my race. And I never asked for that, but that is how it feels. Because now I'm in this space and I have to show up for everybody else who looks like me, which is an added pressure to perform. It's like an added pressure for me to know everything. And like Erika and Maylene and Bahja said about mentorship, like I never had the benefit of that because it's not readily available to people of color. So I've never had the benefit of a mentor. Like everything I felt like I had to figure it out on my own. I had to trial and error on my own. And then when you get to that point, you're like, how am I going to help somebody else? Because I'm not sure if your path is going to look like my path. Right. And I'm not sure how to help you to navigate because I'm still dealing with the pressures of getting from point A to point B and then just fitting in. So I say all of this to say that I think organizations can do more to have represent, and it has to be systemic and it has to be active. It can't just be, okay, I'm filling my diversity quota by having one Black person on my executive board or one black woman here. It has to be something that is consciously taken on and systemically approached.
Amazing. Graham, I'm going to pull you in. I know that we're putting you on the spot. And then Erika, you're going to speak after Graham. I asked a question before in terms of where do you think that challenge is? Again, we see it. And you are in the C-suite.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Shadé. And thanks for inviting me. It really is a privilege and honor to be on this panel. I will tell you, I have never been as nervous or feel as inadequate coming onto an industry function as I do right now. And then listening to each of you speak and your brilliance, borderline hyperventilating before you started mentioning me coming on. So what I thought I'd do is just quickly start by saying, when Shadé joined our organization, I said, look, I will do whatever I can to support your voice at the organization. And if that means me getting uncomfortable, I will absolutely be there for you. And that fell into this discussion. What you asked me about, what does the C-suite see? Well, I can tell you what I see, and I can tell you a little bit more broadly about what I hear. What I see is that it's, at times it's to the point of embarrassing. So for those on the line, you wouldn't know, but I'm the executive leadership team sponsor of our Black ERG. Well, there's a particular reason. There is no BIPOC representation on our ELT today. So, it comes down to, we've got to make sure that we've got somebody being there to be an advocate and support. And we do have a fairly healthy BIPOC group within our enterprise. It's just not represented at the ELT, and I can't imagine how that feels for those that are trying to navigate their path up. So it is very clear. One of the things that I know that I do, and I'll talk probably in the next section about my journey to allyship, although Dionne, I know you said you might not exactly love that that term. I'll talk a little bit about my journey to active allyship. But I will right now, I will ask for panel representation if I'm on industry panels. One of the first things I ask is, can you tell me about what the diversity on that panel looks like? Because I represent perhaps the most privileged within our industry as a Caucasian, cisgendered, middle-aged male. I'm about as privileged as you can get, and I want to make sure that there are different voices there. What I do see as my role is to be an advocate, to help amplify, to use my privilege to help that. But it is very clear to most of us, if you just pay even a remote bit of attention, when you see photographs of whether it be your board, your executive, senior individuals, and if there isn't visible minority representation in there, it's a very awkward recognition today. So I think the discussion is definitely happening more often. What you're not seeing yet is enough success, and I'm hoping that certainly, I'm closer to the end of my career than the beginning, and I'm hoping that we gain some momentum on that, and that each of you are able to, visualize your presence on executives and on boards. So again, thank you for letting me join this panel.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Graham. I'm going to ask for Dionne to join the conversation, but Erika, you first. What from your perspective, you've been in the industry, Erika, Dionne, both amazing. What do we think organizations can do? Like, let's talk practical steps here. Very practical steps.
Well, I mean, I'll just try and keep it short, because I think that there's a lot that can be done. But I think if everyone on this call, so there's like, there was maxed out at 200 or something like that. But think about how many thousands of people are in the insurance industry. If everyone went back to their organization and said, hey, you have to watch this recording so that you can understand what is the experience of, our membership here. How can we help? I do think awareness and constant awareness is part of what it is. It's that constant reminder so that we don't slip back into habits, and it is actually really easy. You're like, the human brain wants to follow the pattern. It doesn't want to be uncomfortable. And I do want to applaud Graham for feeling that discomfort, because it's something that we don't want to do as human beings. We want the easy path, and so to constantly challenge ourselves, I think we need that reminder. We talk about representation. I think that the only reason I am in my C-suite position is because I had a very strong female leader who took an interest in me and who encouraged me and gave me the confidence that I was invited to the table for a reason. And so don't have that imposter bias and really embrace it. And I think, without that mentorship and sponsorship really early in my career, it might have changed into a totally different career. And so again, that's why I do these panels. That's why I'm so passionate about this, is because I want to inspire that next generation, that even though you don't necessarily see someone today, you have every right to be at that table. You shouldn't be afraid to make a joke that, you think, oh, will this joke land wrong in this audience, and things like that, just because it's coming from a different culture, or, you're at work for how many hours of your life. You should feel comfortable there. And so anything we can do to create that space so that people can feel comfortable in their work, and they don't feel that stress from just having to perform 24/7 at their job. Do you know what I mean? And not perform like do your job well, but put on the act to fit in. That's hard, and it's stressful. And so I think if we can do anything, it's to really take that back to our organizations.
Amazing. Okay, we don't have a lot of time, so I was going to say, if anyone has questions, please pop them in now so that we can try and address maybe just 2 questions. Dionne is going to be speaking before we take those questions. So please put in your questions. We're going to take the first 2 questions. Dionne, is sponsorship the only way for Black women to advance? Sponsorship or mentorship? Does that look like it's the only way right now? Do we need allies like Graham? Please bring Graham to the screen as well. Do we need a Graham? You know, is it sponsorship? What is because I'm not in senior management, I'm in mid-level management, and I'm asking myself, I honestly I don't see myself getting to any level in Canada. I'll be honest, maybe in the US.
Well, I'm gonna comment on that. So you asked about the question, what can organizations do? I'm gonna point to the fact that the Canadian Association of Black Insurance Professionals, if you're not a sponsor, partner with us and understand that we are bringing like-minded individuals from the Black community, and some of our co-conspirators are joined, but we don't have enough of it. So sponsorship is not just the financial sponsorship, but the actual sponsorship, like the Grahams of the world, need to insert themselves and be uncomfortable, right? To Graham's point earlier, he said he was intimidated and felt inadequate. And so that is the position that we have all been in. You walk into a room and you're the only Black person in there. What do? You now become a white person, right? Just to assimilate yourself and go through the motions of that. So that's one. Organizations have to really, really tap into meritocracy versus mediocrity. Okay. The elevation of individuals to that C-suite or senior level of leadership should be based on the individual's demonstrated abilities and their merit, not because you're playing this political game. It is one of those things that I never wrap my head around, where you sat me down in an interview, you called me for an interview, we talked, you said, yes, you're the candidate, successful candidate, based on that conversation and based on my skills and abilities. Now you're asking me to not be a culture ad, but to fit your culture, and that's not going to work, right? I am bringing skill sets to add value to your organization. That's what I hope anyways. But because you don't fit in, you go against what's out there, and you stand up for yourself, or you advocate for yourself, you advocate for others, you are now you're blackballed, for lack of a better term. So for me, it's knowing that meritocracy, in my mind, will always prevail. As a leader, when I left the organizations as a leader, I looked at individuals and I said, you know what, have you ever thought of being a leader, right? That's sponsorship, and working with that individual to become that next leader, next generation of leaders. And it's based on their ability to do the work, their drive to get their CIPs, their CRM, their FCIPs, all of which I did because I was told that's the only way you're going to advance. Yet, here I am working for myself, right? So at the end of the day, it's recognizing that organizations have to do a better job of building people based on their merit, the value add that they bring to the organization, and stop elevating mediocre individuals.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Listen, this has been a wonderful conversation yesterday. You know, as I said at the top, we could talk for hours on any one of these topics. And I think, what I've been seeing in the chat was a lot of commentary and people that can relate to, each one of your stories. It is very powerful to bring everyone together and keep having these conversations. Like I said, I've been, around for decades, and, the insurance industry, 20 years ago is different now, and we are able to have these wonderful, Voices of Inclusion series and get these groups together. And us as Black women, we do have a lot to say. We know that there's a lot of movement and a lot of change that can take place. And I think the more that we get together and give these ideas, there's strength in numbers. There really is strength in numbers. So I want to thank everyone on the line today, all of our panelists. Each one of you brought a wonderful perspective. I want to thank again our GIHRG Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Working Group for bringing this panel together. There will be a recording that will be shared with everyone who's registered for this event. So as the suggestion was, take this back to your leadership, have them watch our session. Let's be some of the voices of change, and we'll hopefully make some progress over time. Little shameless plug to EWIIN and to CABIP. It was wonderful to have your voices, Jen and Dionne. I put the link in the chat for those who want to explore and register, become members, etc. I think that was it. So with that, everyone have a wonderful afternoon. If any of the panelists can stay online for a few moments afterwards, that would be awesome. But again, thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again.